Hi
Hello, Marsha.
everyone. Hello. Totally on brand that this happened. With me being the founder of Fuckup Nights, of course, we had a technical difficulty.
I was just about to say it's so fitting to the whole purpose and one of your main missions, destigmatizing failure. Like, oh, we had a couple minute hiccup.
Yeah, I'm here
We
now.
move on.
All good.
Yeah. Yes. So we already know kind of the titles and what you do, but what I would love to know is you're transitioning just like everybody else from in-person events where people get to connect in real time, hear somebody face to face, maybe even shake hands with them after. And now your community's virtual, as are many others. What's been difficult about moving to a virtual community?
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey. So with Fuck Up Nights, for anybody that's maybe not familiar with the community, basically we're a global speaker series, global community that destigmatizes failure. So we have monthly events where 3 or 4 speakers basically go up on stage and they share their biggest fuck ups in front of a room full of strangers.
Oh my
There's
God.
an awesome community of people around it. It's really kind of a way to network in a way that doesn't feel like networking. Everybody's walls are down and people are sharing really real stories. So one
Yeah.
of my first challenges with transitioning to virtual events in this time, at the beginning, I wasn't sure if that conversation was still relevant at a time where everybody is struggling so much and we're in such a time of uncertainty. I wasn't sure if it was relevant to have people sharing stories of past failures or past business fuck ups. And then
Hmm.
any fuck ups that are kind of happening now, they felt like obviously we're kind of in the middle of them, and it's hard to reflect on some of those lessons and really share it in a way where you've had time to kind of process them. So I
Hmm.
found myself in this point where I wasn't sure if my community was relevant right now and if it was going to speak to people in a way that was going to be helpful to them at this time.
Are people
So
going to want to come along with you? That's
yeah,
like
or do
any
people
transition in community. It's like, are your people going to come along with you? Are you going to
exactly?
lose anybody? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Do people want to hear fuck ups now?
Yeah.
So, one of the most important things that I think as a community builder is that you need to engage your community. You need to listen to what they want, what they're telling you. So, to start that journey of transitioning to virtual events or even deciding if it was the time for us to transition to virtual events, I did surveys and I reached out to our community across all of our platforms, across social media, through our email list. And I just did surveys on what kind of content would you like to see right now? Is failure something that's still relevant to you at this time? What kind of
Mm.
content would you like to see from us? And we got some really awesome answers. There were a few people who were, it's not relevant to me right now, but for the most part, the vast majority of our community was like, yes, please, we miss you so much in our lives.
Mm.
We need this. And people gave us great ideas, and we had a great session with the team where we kind of chatted through a bunch of different ideas. And I think one kind of difficult thing with switching to a virtual community, it could seem overwhelming. A lot of community builders, they look at events like this that are happening, all these new platforms that are coming out, and it's overwhelming deciding how to go about it and how to actually start. So
Yeah, and then considering yourself trying to be a leader amongst all of the noise of everything else trying to happen. It's are are,
exactly.
are people gonna think my thing is worth their time? What I'm trying to build for them, is it worth it for them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the very first thing that I did with transitioning our community to virtual, we did an Instagram Live. We brought out one of our past speakers who's like absolutely loved by our community. And we had her share her fuck up again on Instagram Live. And then we did sort of like a brief catch up session on how her business is impacted during these times, how she's been able to kind of apply some of the lessons from her fuck up to being able to kind of stay resilient and kind of pivot through the times right now. And it went over really well. And then from there, we just kind of iterated. Instagram Live was great, but we found that we can get more engagement through our Facebook page, and the video was a lot better through using Zoom and live streaming to there, and it generated more discussion.
And
So
you've already built a culture around embracing failure. So there's got to be one less level of fear when you're just trying new things and you're coming to people with options like, will they like this? Will they think it makes sense? It's okay because the culture is already one of, there's no shaming. Everybody fails and then everybody grows. So it was so conducive towards getting everybody's input in on this.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you. So the transition to virtual community sounds like it's been a fairly smooth one. I'm sure not without its challenges, but it's been fairly smooth.
It's been fairly smooth. I mean, we've definitely had our fair share of fuck ups, some technical issues, some small things here and there, but for the most part, we've seen so much great engagement. We've seen people participating. We've seen people sharing their own fuck ups through different things that we've introduced. So it's been going really well. And we've seen really a lot of new partners that are interested in participating with us, which was another thing that was surprising. I mean, our revenue and the way that we sustain our community is through partnerships and through ticket sales. With our virtual events, we're offering them for free to the community, but we have amazing partners that are totally on board, and we've seen our engagement numbers even go up. There's way more people that are able to join through a virtual event.
Yeah, the breadth of exposure is something that somehow so many people hadn't considered. As widespread and understood as the internet was, like, oh wow, people can tune in from another state or another country. Like, people on this call, we saw people from all over the world, even just tuning into our one discussion here. And somehow we knew it, but it took something like this to really like, oh, we could have impact. We can go far.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what does that future look like? Because the transition has been seamless seamless as seamless gets, let's say, from in person strictly to the virtual element. Is the future back to live? Is the future way more virtual? Is it like a hybrid of both for you and Fuckup Nights Toronto? What does that look like?
So I definitely think it's going to be a hybrid. I mean, at first it was difficult transitioning to virtual events because really, of course, like the magic of our community is in person. Seeing those people get vulnerable, share their stories, being able to connect with the community of people that are there, you know, over a beer or a glass of wine or a drink, and really like have that opportunity to be there physically. So I don't see that going away. I can't wait until we can actually transition back to live events. But that being said, I think it would almost be a disservice to kind of forget the virtual events completely. Just seeing how much engagement we're getting, how accessible it's become for people, you know, who might not be able to afford a ticket or who can't make it to the location where we're hosting our event. So I think it's going to shift to a hybrid. I mean, right now, my guess is as good as yours when we could actually do a live event of our regular size again. But whether it's in a few months or in a year or a few years, I think it's going to be some kind of hybrid where we have maybe a more intimate event in person, but then we're still streaming it live to our Facebook or to YouTube, or who knows, there might be some kind of other technology down the line, and creating some kind of incentive for people to be there in person, but then for anybody who can't join, really giving them an opportunity to feel like they're still at that event, to be able to engage, to ask questions through the online forum that we're in, and to really like have speakers answer them and to really make them feel like they're part of that experience. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to be some kind of hybrid.
Yeah, and I love the idea of incentive, because you've like you said, you've gotten new people who are engaged now. How do you incentivize them to coming along with you for the journey when you go back to this, you know, when you go live again, when there are hybrid options? What is your specific idea of incentivization, if you have one? I mean, it's so ambiguous at this point when that'll be. But do you have an idea of what incentivizing your community will look like to come along with you for this hybrid, for this, you know,
Yeah, really good question. Yeah, we're seeing like with all the virtual events that we've done so far, there's so many people joining who were like, you know, I've been watching Fuckup Nights for the last like 3 years that it existed in Toronto, and it always like it didn't line up with my schedule. Now I could just tune in from the comfort of my couch. I think people are going to be curious to experience what it's like in person if they're in that city and if they're able to make it. A few ways that I can sort of see us incentivizing people to come out, potentially creating something exclusive, like some kind of meet and greet with the speakers at the events, having some kind of opportunity for, you know, like giveaways and things like that at the event, and then also just showcasing the magic of what it looked like before. You know, we have incredible videos and photos from all of our past events, so just kind of reigniting that in people, showing them what it looked like before, and kind of sharing our vision for how it's going to look like
And
moving
it's
forward.
amazing because you have evidence. Like, look, here are pictures of people that we didn't pay to look happy. They really are happy. You know, like here's videos of live events that we experienced and that people enjoyed. So how can you demonstrate the success of your online facet? You know, because you have that in-person stuff, like here are pictures of smiling faces shaking hands. They must be having a good time. What does it look like for the virtual community? How can you demonstrate that it was that this virtual time of your life of your community was a winner, was a success?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right now it's really just we're still in the process of pivoting to it and really like
Mhm.
trying different things and seeing what's going to work. Right now, the way that we're measuring it is through seeing engagement, how many people are tuning in, how many people are sharing, what kind of engagement we get, through people asking questions, through people participating in different ways through those events.
Mhm.
So that's sort of how we're measuring it now. For the virtual
Cool.
event.
If you were to be asked, hypothetically, from someone thinking of starting a virtual community now, what advice would you give them? What would you say are some of the most important things they have to consider?
Yeah, so I would say like my advice is really try not to overthink it and try not to get too bogged down and in the details and making it this grand, crazy thing. It doesn't have to be like a hop-in event like this. It doesn't have to be a huge thing with thousands of people. I think the most important thing is really to communicate with your community, to really understand how you can be there for them during this time, what kind of content they would want to see from you, and how they would want to still participate in that content. And
Yeah.
then really just to get started, that's my biggest piece of advice, is just take that first move, whether it's deciding what platform you're going to use, what your theme is going to be, and then just get going on it. And it really doesn't have to be perfect. I think like the biggest thing that I've learned over this time, and I mean, it's so on brand with Fuckup Nights, is that people are forgiving and they want community more than ever, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Like people are just so happy that it exists and that there's something out there and there's still a way for them to kind of still be part of that community. So yeah, my advice is really just like don't overthink it and just take that first step, and you're going to be really surprised at the reception that you get.
And it makes perfect sense, because even when I asked you like, oh, so what's the idea of incentivizing people to join your hybrid? It's like, oh, we're not even there yet. And the important thing of this kind of time period is just being in the present and making sure you're evolving with the needs and desires of your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Just
Yeah.
taking it one day at a time. Like things are evolving so quickly, and you really just have to be present.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your podcast. And like Fuckup Nights Toronto, amazing idea, fabulous community, going good places. And you now have I think it's a 10 episode all about creating community. I would love to hear a little bit about it.
For sure. So I had this idea for the podcast for a while now. I find it so fascinating how people get into community in the first place. I don't think there's anybody here in this chat, tell me if I'm wrong, that, like growing up in high school, you thought to yourself that I'm going to be a community builder and this is my dream. I think most people just they stumble into it and they just kind of like naturally find their way there.
Yeah.
Love that, David. That's awesome. But yeah, so I found that really fascinating. For me, that was definitely not the case. Never in a million years did I think that I'd be leading something called Fuckup Nights or that I'd be calling myself a community builder. So I found that really fascinating, chatting with other fellow community builders, really like hearing their background stories of how they got to where they are. And then something that I've started noticing is that community has kind of become this buzzword. And I'm seeing people kind of refer to their email list as a community or the number of followers that they have as a community. And I really wanted to create something that took community back to what I see it as, which is really human, like bringing the human element to it. So I
Yeah.
started this podcast a few months ago. I pre-recorded a bunch of episodes talking to fellow community builders and really getting to know their journey of how they actually became a community builder and how they defined community and how they actually grew and scaled their community.
Yeah. And to your point, most of them are just, I was looking for a group of people and I couldn't find that group of people, so I started collecting those people, so I started inviting those people and I created something.
Exactly.
And that's like just so true to your sentiment of just start it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but find what you're looking for, see if it's out there already, and if not, make it.
Absolutely. So many of the people that I've had on the podcast so far are just people that are kind of scratching their own itch. Like they really wanted for something to exist. They wanted a place to belong and they weren't finding it. And yeah, they started it. They just got going on it.
Yeah. So you end your podcasts, every single podcast, by asking your guests, what does community mean for them? So Marsha, what does community mean for you?
Very good question. So to me,
Not to put you on the
yeah,
spot, but
no,
it's only fair.
to me, community, it really comes down to the word belonging. I think community, it could be any size of group of people. It doesn't have to be big. It could be really small. I think it's a group of people with really like a shared interest, a shared passion for something. And it's a place where people can feel like they belong, that there isn't really like any strong mechanics or something that they have to do to be part of that community. They just feel like they're part of it and they belong.
Yeah. And that brings me to your interview with the founder of Women Who Weed. Like I wrote down this note because I loved it. Belonging is bringing your true self to that group. And then in my mind, I'm filling in the blank, like fitting in is trying to change yourself so it works. But like belonging is just who you are being accepted.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a great interview. And that's such an important distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. So I leave this now towards Q&A. Yeah. If anybody has any questions for Marsha, please feel free to type them in. See if anybody wrote something that I missed.
Awesome.
David Spinks fell into it, but he also Valentina never thought about being a community leader. It's like quicksand and then you never want to get out of it. Yeah, it's so true, because really at the root of it, community is just being where you feel connected, where you feel where there's belonging, where you're aligned with people on your morals, you're aligned with people on things. So why wouldn't you want more of it? Especially like you think of professional communities, like people who are a part of groups of people specifically to develop their professional life. And I'm a part of several of them, and that's really where I get my closest connections come out of that. But the whole point is finding something that you resonate with and surrounding yourself with people like that who accept you, who you accept.
For sure. And then on the personal side of things as well, there was a really interesting guest, like one of the podcasts, he mentioned that he kind of does this on the personal side as well, even with his friendships and the people that are going to be like those like top 5 or 6 people that he spends the most time with. It's almost like doing an audit and figuring out who are going to be really like bringing value to your life.
Yeah. The personal audit was really something like, let me think of what this person's bringing into my life, and is there room for other people into my life? Yeah. So I guess there's still an opportunity to ask any questions. Question, Marsha, what communities or community professionals inspire you?
Ooh, good question. I absolutely love creative mornings. So it was really cool to see Tina's talk earlier today. That's a community that I've been part of for a while. I went to my first one, just like Fuckup Nights, actually in Tel Aviv, and then I was able to join in Toronto. So yeah, that's definitely one top of mind. And then there's an awesome tech community in Toronto that I'm very much a part of. There's lots of different events and ways to kind of get involved, and I definitely make use of that.
Yeah. Marjorie, hello Marjorie. Do you see Fuckup Nights expanding outside of Toronto? Would love to see this in the States.
Really good question. So Fuckup Nights is actually a global speaker series, global community. It's in over 300 cities already. So the global website for Fuckup Nights is fuckupnights.com. You could see all the different cities that participate. There's a bunch of virtual events that are happening now, so you can participate worldwide and in different languages and different time zones as well.
And it's just such an amazing concept. Like, let's not only get together for a meaningful evening of kind of like authentic relationship building, but let's also hear stories of people who failed and who made a big mistake and it cost them time, money, energy, headache, whatever it cost them, it set them back. But they're on the stage for a reason. The destigmatizing failure is just such an important thing. Like, oh my God, people make mistakes.
It's big. Yeah, there's a big mental health component to it as well. Our
Yeah.
talks focus on business and professional fuck ups, but that doesn't just happen in a bubble. So we've had people really like openly share some of their mental health struggles that they were going through, or maybe an important relationship fell apart while their business was failing, and it really
Yeah.
is this well-rounded story.
Yeah. And I think it's because of the destigmatization of also shame in that. Because shame is a big part of why failure sucks. It's because you feel awful about it for everybody else. But yeah, no. So, oh, we got another question from Andrea. Hello, Andrea. Do you recommend any particular books on community or community organizing?
Yes, there's one that I read recently. It's called Belonging, or no, sorry, it's called Belong by Radha Agrawal. She's the founder of the Daybreaker community, which is this amazing dance community. So I absolutely love that book. She goes through her personal journey, how she became a community builder, also totally fell into it. And it just resonates with me on every level. I'd really recommend anybody who's a community builder to read it and to listen to some of her interviews as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Unless there's a last minute question, I think this would just about do it. I'll wait about 5 seconds. But Marsha, this has been awesome.
Great chatting with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.